Hello, and welcome to Let My People Eat, a podcast that provides satisfying talk about kosher nutrition. Here we clear through the clutter of nutrition speak, arm you with the clarity and confidence to eat, feel, and be your healthiest every day. I am Jill Scharfman, a board-certified holistic nutritionist living in Los Angeles, and with me is Dr. Andrea Moskowitz.
Hi, I'm Dr. Andrea Moskowitz, and I'm a neuroscientist and psychiatrist. I use my training and experience to integrate positive lifestyle changes into my patients' lives.
Hey, Andrea.
Hey, Jill. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. We're going to talk about a very serious topic today. We're going to talk about how the Jewish community is not immune to diet and health situations, the pressure to be thin, factors that contribute to eating disorders in our community. When I talk about eating disorders, I'm talking about things like anorexia nervosa, bulimia, and binge eating disorder.
Good.
So very, very serious topic today, but we're very fortunate that we have with us Sarah Bateman. She has been practicing social work for more than 10 years. She's the Renfrew Center's liaison to the Jewish community, and she ensures that individuals with eating disorders in our community are able to receive culturally sensitive treatment and that their unique religious needs are met. Ms. Bateman has a private practice with offices in New York and New Jersey. She provides training for professionals and lectures in schools while working to raise awareness and understanding of eating disorders in the Jewish community. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So there was one study I saw that a Dr. Sacker did that claimed that ultra-Orthodox and Syrian Jewish communities in Brooklyn, 1 out of 19 girls was diagnosed with an eating disorder, which is a rate higher than the general U.S. population. And I was wondering, do you believe that number is true? Is it really that high?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked that. I know that study was never published. It's out there. That number comes up a lot, but was never actually published, and I don't know why. The other study we have is in Toronto that also showed. It was on adolescent girls, and it also showed a much higher rate of Jews with eating disorders than Jews in the general population. Mm-hmm. We do not have any studies on adult women, and we don't have any kind of empirical studies showing that it's getting worse, or that other than these 2 small studies on adolescent girls, which, as I said, one wasn't published for unknown reasons, we don't really know that it's more. I do know is that we have more Jews in treatment for eating disorders than there are Jews in percentage-wise in the general U.S. population.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this leads me to the next question, that it's possible that eating disorders are underreported among Orthodox Jewish women because of the stigma attached to mental illness.
Okay. So I want to be careful that we're not just speculating and kind of hearing one thing and deciding it's a big problem. I hear a lot of anecdotal reports that there's so much pressure focused on appearance in the Jewish community. There's worry about stigma for getting married, for matchmakers asking questions about mental illness in the family, about the girl's size and weight. Those are things that we hear all the time. I like to be very careful that we are coming from a factual point of view, and I can't speak to anything we don't have actual data on.
I'm very curious about this topic because like you said, we do hear a lot of stories. I mean, I just recently heard a story about a shadchan who took a girl's photos for her shidduch resume and just photoshopped them. And I'm not talking light Photoshop, like editing and things like that. I'm talking really photoshopping them. So there's a lot of pressure on these girls to look a certain way. That thin is beautiful, and it puts a lot of pressure on them and their family on being thin. I know that's only one part of the eating disorder spectrum, but I do hear a lot of those things going on. So why can you talk to maybe why you think there's this larger percentage representation than the population?
So I think, like I said, I know that there's more Jews in treatment. I don't know that there's more Jews with eating disorders. It could be that because our centers are in cities that are more highly populated by Jewish people, there could be more access to treatment. There's actually Jewish values about seeking help and getting help. So those are all points that would say that there's more Jews in treatment that would support that. But what I can speak to, what I do talk about a lot in my trainings is that even if we don't know that there's more, we know that we have to understand the unique cultural issues that might contribute to it, and look at kind of all the factors. As you were saying, there's a focus on appearance, and that can be a huge piece for an Orthodox Jew who wouldn't consider changing their faith.
Mm-hmm.
Food can become the good girl's drug. It's kind of the safe way to rebel. It's not really doing anything bad. I say that in quotation marks.
Right. It's more socially acceptable than maybe drug abuse or alcohol abuse.
Yeah, not using hard drugs, just, starving yourself
mm-hmm.
to the point where you can't function. And so I excuse my sarcasm a little bit, but
no, it's okay.
There's also a lot of factors in. I try to look at the whole picture of Jewish rituals and how observances can be triggering. And this is said completely without blame. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Jewish rituals, but for people who have mental illness and are suffering from eating disorders, what rituals and observances can become problematic. And keeping kosher is a very rigid way of eating. And it makes certain foods off limits. It means that it's not just okay, but you're supposed to wait a certain amount of time after eating one thing before eating another.
Right. There was a book written a few years ago called The Devil's in the Details. And it was a book by an Orthodox woman who wrote about how, because everything's so regulated, the blessings, the hand washing, the laws about what you can and can't eat, when you can eat meat after, dairy after meat or things like that, it made a perfect firestorm for somebody who was OCD, because they had all these, take 3 steps back when you're praying, take 3 steps forward. It's fascinating book. So, I'll try and post that in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. I want to add that, again, I said that these rituals aren't problematic and can even become helpful in the treatment process. The idea is, for somebody who's already suffering, these can be ways to get stuck and to really have a problem. Like, one example I give with keeping kosher is, if you can't buy food outside the home and there's nothing kosher available, it's a really good excuse to not eat all day. And then, that's obviously not the point of keeping kosher, of why there's that rule in the religion, but it can be used as an excuse.
Right. And I know that in the OU's documentary that they did, Hungry to Be Heard, about eating disorders in our community, you could see that people were struggling because during holiday times or during the Shabbos, they were confronted with this abundance of food, and they didn't really know quite how to handle it. So it was either binging or restricting, or, they would omit certain foods, and, not being able to exercise on Shabbos it was a very, very stressful time for them. Yes.
Just the focus on food, with having the Sabbath meals Friday night and Saturday lunch, and that for many people, it's having 2 Thanksgiving meals in a row every single weekend,
right?
And then just all the additional holidays, and it's not just the food; it's also the sitting around the table and the focus on the food and the eating and the not doing other things. And for people who struggle with their families, the focus on either being with their families or not being with their families, and the additional triggers that come with that.
Right. And can you speak to, have you seen an increase in at Renfrew in the number of, I'm assuming, women and girls? I mean, I know there are men who suffer as well.
Correct. We don't treat men at the Renfrew Center.
Okay.
So it is just women and girls.
So have you seen an increase?
We haven't seen a significant increase in the numbers. what I can tell you is that I get to see the kind of positive side because I do speak in schools, and there's more schools willing to have me come in and speak than there used to be, and more rabbis who are informed, who can kind of help give advice with fast days and what to do. So, like I said earlier, my perspective might be skewed because I'm the one that people come to for help. So I'm seeing the people who are willing to get help, but I'm seeing more people willing to talk about it and kind of come in from a preventative side also. I spoke in one school where the principal kind of started out saying, a lot of people think that because we talk about this, it means we have a problem. We feel like we have less of a problem because we're willing to talk about it.
Right. Let me ask you something, because I've noticed I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, just so you know. Over the years, have you seen younger people than before, younger girls showing eating disorder traits or symptoms? Or
So over the years, there have been a few very young girls. I've gotten calls for different ages. I don't treat people younger than 12 usually, and depending on which Renfrew Center location we're at, depending on the state licensure, it's usually around 12 or 13 also.
Okay.
Have you heard of the diagnosis ARFID?
Yeah, what does that stand for again?
Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder.
Okay. I don't know what that is, so if somebody could define that.
With younger people, a lot of times it's basically like not just picky eating, it's extreme picky eating that doesn't get better with age and has to do with textures and physical reactions to eating. So we're seeing more younger patients with the diagnosis of ARFID, which is something that we're able to work with at our centers now also.
Now, just in general, are these eating disorders a sign of trauma? Is it genetics? Like what generally prompts, these eating disorders?
So it's never just one thing. That's my experience, is that it's always more than one thing. It's a variety of factors. There has to usually be some kind of predisposition genetically towards mental illness, either depression, anxiety, OCD. There's often an unmet need, and I say that completely without judgment or blame, but sometimes there's just a factor in the family where there's a kind of mismatch between the child and the parent, and their needs aren't met, and either their communication, their voice, or their control, or their wants, desires become expressed through food and their bodies instead of through words or being able to proactively have their needs met in a positive way.
So they're rebelling by trying to control their bodies.
And for some people, I mean, rebelling is a strong word. I think some people don't feel like they even consciously know what they're doing or have a choice. But yeah, it can be a way to say, hey, I'm suffering, or hey, I need help, or hey, I'm tired of being the good one. I need you to see me, hear me, notice me, or I want to disappear. I don't want to be here. So it can be a lot of different things.
Right.
Do you think that some of these young women who are getting close to marriageable age and are entering that world, that maybe they don't feel they're quite ready to be intimate with a man, to have children, to have this family, and they're adopting these habits and patterns as a way of putting the brakes on things? And once again, especially if they...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to back up for a second and just say also that there's often sexual trauma, and that's another factor we see a lot. But yes, especially in the Orthodox world, for young girls who are getting married, and in some communities, birth control isn't considered acceptable.
Right.
It's, there's the commandment in the Torah in the Bible to reproduce and have children and multiply. So there are some communities who don't allow birth control. And for young girls getting married at 18, they might not feel ready to start reproducing, or even to have sexual relations with a spouse that they barely know.
Right. There are a lot of girls who haven't even talked to boys. They're maybe their brothers or cousins, but all of a sudden they're thrown into this situation.
But I think that also...
So basically, starving your body can be conscious or unconscious way to make it not able to reproduce and
because they experience
kids before you're ready.
Amenorrhea. Did I say that right?
Exactly.
Yeah, where they can, where they can't even get pregnant. So that, is definitely a way to push that off.
Yeah. And I wonder too if some of them, it's not just even getting married. It's not just even having children. It's that, I know it's accepted in the communities and everything and no judgment, but for a lot of young women, probably 18 or 19 even feels too young to get married.
Right. Yeah.
And it's overwhelming. They go into high school and the expectation is already you're thinking about shidduchim and getting ready for that. And, they're 14 or 15 and maybe not ready for it all. It's overwhelming. And this is something that the food is something they could control.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
If they can't control the other things.
Do you see readmission of patients that you've dealt with who come back and have to go through therapy again and need your help?
Yes. A lot of times people need a second round of treatment. Sometimes they need to go to a different treatment center. But I also see people who recover, and I have some kind of longer term patients who come back and just check in every once in a while when there's a life challenge, but really feel like their time in treatment helps them not have food be the main focus of their lives and able to deal with their issues. So maybe I'm throwing that in to just to let you know that I also see people who do well.
There is hope, but I think maybe you and Andrea can talk to this. This is very serious. This is not something easy to recover from. The mortality rates can be high. Jump in. Let me talk to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a higher rate of mortality in anorexia than any other mental illness. It's not a joke.
And it can be extremely hard to treat.
If there's a teenage girl suffering and the parents are saying, well, what if she just wants to be thin? I would say, well, what if there's more to it? And what does it mean to just want to be thin?
Are you seeing mostly anorexia, or do you see binge eating? Do you see bulimia, or is it all everything?
The majority of people don't meet the criteria for any one of those. It's more, most people kind of switch between symptoms. Okay. They might want to restrict their calories to the point of anorexia, but can't maintain that, and then end up binging, and then, because of the change in symptoms, don't meet the criteria for anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating disorder. Yeah. And then it's, not otherwise specified. And then they feel like, well, I'm not sick enough to need help. I don't have a real eating disorder and I don't really have a problem. So that can be another problem in itself.
Can you talk a little bit about some of I know this is a big topic and books have been written about it, but like some of the treatment modalities you use and how you guys approach it for the eating disorders? And I realize that's a very complicated question. Yeah,
but just really quickly, we've always used CBT because it's a lot of short-term with insurance work.
So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy,
right?
Exactly, cognitive behavioral therapy. DBT skills, dialectical behavioral therapy.
What is that?
And teaching some emotional tolerance, how to kind of get through difficult emotions. There's specific skills.
So cognitive behavioral therapy is helping prepare you with behaviors in certain situations. You practice exposure to certain situations, and then how you can prepare to deal with that. And
your thoughts that come up when you have the exposures, and how you can react differently.
Okay.
And setting short-term goals that are really, that you're able to really meet and show progress.
Okay. Great.
And we've been using the unified treatment model to really help people, instead of just distracting themselves from the difficult emotions, to learn how to tolerate their feelings and get through what they're struggling with.
Do people, are a lot of these girls and women in denial? Do they, once they come to you, do they realize they have a problem, or do they think they don't know why they're at the Renfrew Center? Like, they don't know why they're
that depends on the person. There are people who know exactly why they're there. There are people who don't think they need to be there, and I'd say that's pretty across the board.
Okay. And what about, I mean, I'm particularly concerned interested as a holistic nutritionist, what nutritional aspects you use in terms of therapy, in terms of, do you provide them with multi-nutrients? Do you make sure their electrolytes are in balance? Do you give them bone formulas to make sure their bones stay strong? Like, any of those things enter into the treatment?
Yes. So we have a multidisciplinary approach where everybody would be seen by a therapist, a dietitian, a psychiatrist, and in the residential, there's the nursing care also. And so everybody's trying to really look at the whole picture. What I think is great about the nutrition piece is that we focus on getting the different foods and the different exchanges in. A lot of times it's kind of the opposite of what people came in thinking of what they can't get in and what's bad, what's wrong, what's off limits. And instead to put the focus on making sure that your body's getting the nutrients that it needs, the energy, the fuel, and looking at the different food groups, customizing a meal plan for each person and making sure that the focus is on getting in those exchanges.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever venture into places like herbs to stimulate appetite, or looking at deficiencies in zinc or B vitamins, adrenal support? Do you ever venture into those areas, or is that a new area?
I can't speak to that. I'm not with the nutrition team at all, and I'm not sure if they're using anything like that.
Okay, great. Because those just, from my background are definitely things that we would look at just to, hopefully they have these nutrients from adolescence, but if they're low in certain vitamins, we don't know really, is it an antecedent or is it a consequence of their eating disorder at the current time?
Yeah. Could you go back a little bit? Sorry. And go over maybe the role of trauma that trauma might play in eating disorders.
You want me to speak about?
Yeah, we kind of glossed over. You mentioned sexual trauma, and I think that's an important topic that at least
I realized that I didn't mention it when I was going through the different factors, and I think it's important to just note the correlation between sexual trauma and eating disorder. There's a high correlation,
and obviously, like you said, the Orthodox Jewish life, a lot of patients, if they don't have a clinician who's from a different background and they can understand what's going on in our community, maybe that there's a stigma around mental illness or how to take action, it's very important that the treatment team is familiar with that, which is something that the Renfrew Center can do and you can do, and provide the appropriate team to help these girls recover and do better. So, I want to encourage everyone, if anybody out there you think may have an eating disorder, please tell someone. If you're a teen and you see a friend, please tell someone so they can get help, because it is very serious. And, you can get in touch with the Renfrew Center. Their social media handle is @Renfrew Center, but you can go online and search and, please get help.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I want to encourage, Renfrew is great because they're so culturally sensitive to the Jewish community, but this is not going to be available for everyone. Right. So please don't make that a barrier to getting treatment. The most important thing is to get treatment for the eating disorder. Most mental health professionals are very open to being educated about cultural issues, and that should not be the reason why someone doesn't get treatment for these. Because sometimes I've heard, in the community, like, oh, I can't go to this person, or I can't go here because there's not a Jewish therapist, or there's not a Jewish treatment team, or they don't understand. And these disorders are extremely serious. They can have long-term, very negative consequences, including, as you mentioned, death. And the most important thing is to get good treatment.
Right. And Sarah, the Renfrew Center does have a lot of other offices besides New York and New Jersey, correct?
Correct.
Right. Right.
We have residential in Philly and in Florida, and we have many outpatient centers besides that.
Okay.
You can look it up on renfrewcenter.com.
And
can I just add one quick thing to your points before? I just wanted to add also that it doesn't have to be at the point of it being a serious eating disorder to seek help. Right. That the prognosis is always better when you get help sooner, earlier. Right. And like I was saying earlier, a lot of times people feel like I don't have enough of a problem, I'm not really sick. Mm-hmm. And that's actually a normal part of the disordered thinking. And for many women, before it's an eating disorder, it's disordered eating. Right. And so I just want to emphasize that it doesn't have to be that bad to get help. It's okay to seek treatment, even if you don't think you're as bad as somebody else, or you don't think you look like you're sick, because a lot of times you can't tell by looking, and appearance doesn't say anything about what's really going on inside.
Disordered eating? I know you said disordered eating, but I didn't define it. Yes. Right. Yeah. Basically meaning that it's not meeting the criteria to have a mental illness, but that it's the basic definition, the most basic definition of normal eating is eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. Okay. And very few people do that all of the time. But Are you doing that most of the time? Are you doing that sometimes? Are you doing that not so often? Are you doing that never? So to really paying attention, are you using food to deal with emotional issues? Are you using food for comfort? Are you depriving yourself of food for control? Are you putting too much focus on going to the gym to the point where it interferes with your life, but you don't, like I said, you don't meet the criteria in the diagnostic and statistical manual for having a mental disorder. But it could still be a problem. Right. So I just want to emphasize that it doesn't have to be that bad, and it doesn't have to be the point where you're sick or you're really suffering before you get some help.
Right. I mean, I would also add, does it get in with the way of your relationships with other people? Especially close. I know we're almost out of time, but can you give for parents, because it's one thing to talk about those kind of things and self-checks for somebody who's a little bit older, but teenagers are not really great on self-checks. So if you can just maybe briefly go over some of the warning signs for parents and school staff to be looking for in teenagers.
Sure. So if you go on our website, therenfrewcenter.com, we have a tab for warning signs, and you can actually look at complete lists of warning signs for anorexia and bulimia and binge eating disorder. But just really quickly, again, if you feel like the desire to be thin or the behaviors around food are getting in the way of functioning or relationships, if constantly going to the bathroom after meals, noticing excessive hair loss, focus on food, wanting to feed others but not feeding themselves, pushing the food around on plates, wanting to go to the gym. There's a lot of common warning signs to be aware of, but I would also just encourage parents to listen to their instincts. If you feel like there's a problem, don't wait for the problem to get worse. Go for help right away.
Right. Great. All right, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. There's also Relief Resources, which is a mental health referral organization providing information referrals to clinicians or programs experienced in dealing with Orthodox Jewish patients. You can also get in touch with the Orthodox Union. They have that, as I mentioned, the documentary Hungry to be Heard, which focuses on the rates of anorexia, bulimia, and other eating disorders on the Jewish community. And, of course, you can always go to renfrew.com and reach out to them. But please get help.
Please.
Yes, and help your friends. All right. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Jill Scharfman. And that is it for this episode of Let My People Eat. Please visit our website at letmypeopleeat.com and leave us a comment. Get in touch at our email at podcast@letmypeopleeat.com or call us at 317-659-0004. Post on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook with the hashtag #LetMyPeopleEatPodcast. If you like this show, please make sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Tell your friends and family, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts.
And please remember that although we are certified professionals, this is not a medical advice podcast. No content, posts, or comments should be interpreted as professional guidance. always speak to your own health practitioner about making the right life changes for you.
Until next time, I am Jill Scharfman.
And I'm Andrea Moskowitz.
Thanks for joining us.
And go in good health.